I just finished this really good book, and I believe we interviewed the author when it came out, or we at least talked about it, and that's the Robert Altman oral biography.
Oh, it's great, isn't it?
Oh, dude, I've been reading this, like, really religiously. Like, I started it right before the show last Sunday, and I've just been reading it every night, and I just, like, got through a huge chunk of it yesterday and finished it today. Would I be out of line to say maybe down the line we want to do a whole, like, a kind of Robert Altman series?
Yeah, I'd love to do one. Yeah, there's such a wealth of stuff to do, yeah. I completely agree. That's a great idea. But you know what I love most about that book? First of all, it's an incredibly fast read. But secondly, it's the way the book is put together. So you're not reading all this prose. You're reading an ongoing conversation with everyone that worked with Altman in quotes, and it feels like an Altman film the way you're reading it,
right?
Because it's an ensemble book. That's how it reads.
Right.
It's beautiful.
I couldn't wait to get back to it every time. I mean, I was just like really blown away by a lot of the insights. I think when you're reading it, you also realize the odds were always against him and how he overcame them, and his attitude towards everything was just unbelievable. And he was also somewhat insecure. You get that too at times, especially in the 80s. In the 80s, especially. And like, if that was me in the 80s, I would have probably just gone off into a room and blown my brains out. But not him. He persevered, and it's very inspiring.
Really complicated character. Really complicated character, and probably the reason why he was so nasty at times was because he had this insecurity about him. But also a great part of the book was the McCabe. Obviously, I was particularly drawn to the McCabe chapter. And the whole chapter consists of people talking about what an asshole Warren Beatty is. And then finally the chapter closes with Warren Beatty telling his side of the story.
Right.
It builds up like this great climax. It's a terrific book.
No, it's a wonderful book. I strongly recommend it for anybody who's interested in Altman or just in filmmaking or as a filmmaker should definitely read it. Because you say that thing about, it's really interesting, Jimmy. You say the thing like he was an asshole and all this. But I'm beginning to think, I'm not beginning to think, I know this just from just who I am. I think you have to be an asshole in some ways. I mean, damn the torpedoes, damn what people think about you. If you really want to do this, I mean, I think the scene where they talk about, where he decides, if I had to choose between my family and filmmaking, films. I'd make films. Sorry, I love that. I mean, there's an honesty there that's just like, wow, that's great.
Well,
good for you.
I'm not talking about his dealings with studio and that kind of stuff, because obviously he had an abhorrence of anyone in positions of authority.
To the very last day.
I'm talking about, his closest collaborators, and they would all say, on a dime, he would just turn nasty. That was who he was. Yeah. A fascinating guy.
Let me ask you that. Let me ask you this though, because we talk about this, and we talked about this here. I know a lot of people who are are nasty, but they don't. Unfortunately, I don't have a problem with arrogance as long as there's talent and intelligence to back it up. If those two things aren't there, then it doesn't. It's bullshit. But if you have the talent and the intelligence to back that up with, you can be as nasty as you want. I don't care.
I don't need to be your friend. I mean, I get stuff out of your films, and that's what I'm supposed to get from you.
Right.
And I think it's something that Woody Allen actually explored in a movie like Sweet and Lowdown. How this man produces such angelic music, like from heaven, and it's so loving and tender, and yet he is an absolute louse.
Yeah,
in real life.
That's a great analogy. I was thinking of that film too while reading this. That's great.
Yeah, that's the dichotomy there. So, what Altman film speaks most personally to either of you guys?
That's a good question. I want to say California Split because I posted those photos yesterday, but ironically, I think The Long Goodbye. I discovered that later in life, in the last 5 years. I think, to me, that one and Shortcuts maybe. definitely speak to me. But I love Nashville. I love, obviously, McCabe and Mrs. Miller. You know, I'll say this. Maybe McCabe and Mrs. Miller, because Major Dundee was on AMC, I think, yesterday, and my dad was watching it, so it was on for 7 hours, I think. I think McCabe and Mrs. Miller may be the most authentic Western ever made, because it's maybe how it really was. And the only other example I can give of that recently is maybe Deadwood. It wasn't, as like our parents' generation grew up. I actually think McCabe and Mrs. Miller may be the way the West really was.
McCabe, to me, is just, and I think it's really set off by mainly the photography and the choice of Leonard Cohen score.
Mm-hmm.
There is something so transcendent about that movie. Transcendent in a way that Badlands is transcendent, or parts of Cuckoo's Nest for me. There's this poetry that takes it to a different level for me. I love that movie, and I love The Company, because I watched The Company, and I think, Altman finally did it. Altman always wanted a way to break the 3-act structure, and I always felt like he did it with The Company. The Company isn't built with a 3-act structure necessarily. It has no climax. It's not really building towards much. I mean, there's that final performance in the rain, but it goes on beyond that. It truly feels like a period of time in the lives of these dancers, this company, and the camera's following them around. I think it's a brilliantly done and yet difficult to watch movie, because we're conditioned to watch movies with a beginning, middle, and end that we can latch on to. Yeah. Dean, how about you?
Oh, for me, I guess it'll always be Nashville, because not only did it kind of inform my taste in movies, but, seeing it when I was, 9 years old or whatever, 9 or 10. But I've realized that over the years, going back and watching it, that it also informs my view of people, of politics, and women, morality, and I think that's just about all I need to say about it. I mean,
you got a mouthful. That's enough. May I ask a question, Dean? Can I ask you a question, though? Because that's a great choice. I mean, Nashville is the ultimate choice, and it is probably one of the greatest American films ever made. There's a book that came out in 2000 about Nashville. Did you read that? Did you ever read that book? Oh, it's a wonderful book. If you get it, I'll send it down to you, because it's just collecting dust here. But it's a great, like a kind of oral history like this, the Altman biography. But it's just a wonderful book. And, Nashville is just one of those kind of films I think you could watch. I think you could watch Nashville every week for the rest of your life, and you discover something new every time.
I agree with that, too. And I love more than any of his other movies, I love the interplay between all of the characters, the cutting back and forth, which to me it's kind of the first of his movies to do that. I mean, he's always been known as somebody who has huge casts that and multiple storylines. But if you examine his career closely, with the exception of some aspects of MASH and McCabe, Nashville is the first film that really commits to that kind of structure. And I think that's because I think he owes a big debt to American Graffiti in that respect, because when American Graffiti came out, people said nobody's going to understand this movie because it's got all of these characters and we're not following any one story from beginning to end, and people are going to be confused. And I have a feeling that he probably ran up against that himself, in trying to do a movie like Nashville, pre-1975.
Right.
And once it was proved by American Graffiti that not only would audiences follow it, but actually follow this kind of storytelling, but actually love it, I think he probably felt the okay to go full force with Nashville, and then later on with things like A Wedding and so forth.
By the way,
to do these.
By the way, did you see that Tony Macklin's in that book?
Yeah. Oh, dude, I was like, oh my God, I've talked to this guy. So that was very nice.
He was, and I don't think Tony was aware of it. So I bought him that book for last Christmas and sent it up to him. I said, by the way, you're in this book.